welcome to the public series of I3PM, the I3PM Quarterly. It's the third edition already of this I3PM Quarterly. And this week, the topic is IP portfolio development and maintenance. My name is Martin Wilming. I'm the one on the slide on the bottom left, but I'm really not so important today. The guy on the upper right side is much more important today. That's Christian Mohr. He is chairing the committee of I3PM on IP portfolio management. Let's move on to the next slide. As I said, that's probably the most unimportant slide, but now that it is there, I'm just a delegate of I3PM board today. I'm hosting this session. I'm a member of I3PM since 2008, actually founding member. I have been the first president of I3PM. That's 15 years ago. And meanwhile, I'm only treasurer, and now I will be hosting this session. So I'm glad you joined this I3PM Quarterly. Now to the one who is the important one today, that's Christian. He's a German patent attorney and European trademark and design attorney. And I always find it, I have a feedback. Please mute your microphones when joining. I always find it interesting how people's career develop. When I read Christian's profile, he has been a biologist by training in terms of technology. Then he later moved to industry, and he was with Electrolux. That is a company known for home appliances, not much to do with biology. But still, I always find that amazing how people change their pathway in their career. Most recently, he went back to private practice. He's now with Tergau and Walkenhorst. He has been an equity partner there since, I think, this month actually, or last month. He is chief visionary officer now with Tergau Walkenhorst. And in my understanding of his new role, he is really responsible for the strategic positioning of this traditional patent attorney firm, which I found very interesting. And he's responsible for the development of new products and services. And if I'm not mistaken, Christian, but correct me if I'm wrong, I understand you are upon to offer a training for company executives in IP, which will be called the next IP leaders. So that really shows your engagement in training and the spreading of real IP management, which really is an important thing and which we will hear more about later. Just some housekeeping issues up front. 5:30, welcome by me. That's obviously what we are currently doing. In a few minutes, we will start with Christian's presentation on IP portfolio development and maintenance. We will have a Q&A session afterwards, and we will be finished, whenever we are done, but we are currently thinking about 6:15 roundabout. As to the housekeeping, we are quite a crowd today. It's important for us to somehow streamline the discussion. So please type your questions as you have them into the chat function. We will review the chat, and we will then pick up the questions and request you on stage to present that question when we get to that question. If there are so many questions that we can't request everyone on stage, we will deal with the question afterwards on the website or on LinkedIn or whatever. So we will address everything as possible, and then some will have the chance to move on stage and present that question. But please type it in the chat function. You might have realized that already, that there was a pop-up that this session is recorded. The session will be made available later on the I3PM website. So again, it's important that you mute your microphone when you are not speaking. And if you are not comfortable at all with this session being recorded, you're still, of course, free to leave. But this session will be recorded anyway and will be made available on the I3PM website for everybody to benefit, even if he or she couldn't make it to the session live. So with all that being said, we are ready to move to Christian's presentation. Christian, the floor is yours. Thank you. I will stop my screen sharing.
Thank you, Martin, for this perfect introduction. And I did like only one thing in particular, not so much, which was the question about importance. I think it is as important that you pave the stage here and organize all of this so that we can discuss together such important topics. This is, I think, an honor for me to speak to this audience today, and therefore thank you for you. I don't think that it's about being important or not. And then I just take the hooks and say, yeah, the story to tell is probably something which brought me from biology and starting with a generics company advisor in a very small boutique law firm, and then how it became that in the end I ended up in building induction hobs and microwave ovens that can be shared later by a beer probably. However, and I think there lies something which might be important for what I would like to show you today, and which was not only created by me solely, which is probably the outcome of a sophisticated discussion, also particularly between Alex and me over the years. It is probably not so much the technology which only matters. And in our traditional understanding, we find very often patent professionals which talk much about whether they are physicists or whether they have studied whatever. And probably it's also more the view which we have to develop, which comes from another direction. And one of these directions is also how innovation actually works and how innovation happens. And just to bind that together, what I do now in TWIP is particularly being a patent attorney in a very traditional law firm, which has a history of, I think, more than 100 years, if you count all the partners together, but really try to do something new and approach this from new view angles, and particularly from the user view angles. And now changing the sides from being a in-house corporate attorney and now becoming again a service provider, the question was, where did I feel most pain? And that was indeed that I was confronted with a lot of good patent professionals, none of, or rare number of them being really well-educated leaders. So you easily spend 2,000 hours in becoming a great doctoral degree physicist, and then you spend another 2,000 hours plus to become a great patent professional. How much do you spend on leadership? And this is what we want to launch next year and Cure, an IP-specific training for leaders. But that is not the story of today. It's just to complement what Martin said. The story of today is that I'm co-chairing with many others the IP portfolio team here in the I3PM. And today I would like to give you some insights about what we have collected over the last year, what could be done if you approach a certain situation. And this certain situation actually does not start with IP. It starts actually with a comprehensive understanding of the environment from a business perspective which you are in. That is what I would like to start with. It's not that you have a particular patent in front of you. It's probably that you are confronted with a certain situation, whether it's a young startup or whether it's a mature corporate which comes and sees a certain market situation evolve. And I have made one example for you, which was realistic, which I anonymized for you, but where particularly the story which I want to tell you was becoming important. So when we start with such a situation, the question is, where should you actually place your IP to? And the tradition says, whatever is created by R&D, you put a patent on it. And to some extent, it will create a return of invest. Perfect. And if that would be the holy grail, we could stop here. 3 minutes. And Alex Skeptical View always says, no, that's not the truth we are selling here. Yeah, it's probably more that you look into the business situation first and say, okay, where is the place to be for IP in my environment? And this is particularly your customer who says, where is my benefit in that? Why the hell shall I spend money on this product? And that's the main question. How can I bring the customer benefit together with the willingness to pay? And this is not in the first place an IP question, but this is where we as IP professionals have to become much more proficient with business language and listen and understand what the hell is the business strategy I'm serving here. And if I understood that, and if they apply, for example, design thinking as a process and say, what's the customer needs? How can I cure them? Then in the last place, in the next step, it is the question, what technically enables these benefits? But we will come to that later. For me, it's important at that stage that you understand in this talk, and probably in such a IP strategy setup, we start with business and with nothing else. So taking it from here, the question is, what are the forces which actually control such a market scenario? And I always find it interesting to point something which actually is now as old as I am, 44 years. In 1979, Mike Porter, which is probably known to many of you, published a really remarkable article in Harvard Business. It was the How Competitive Forces Shaping Strategy article. And in that, he brought basically up a little theory, which is known to most business people and probably to you as well. But I think it's interesting to place this into the framework of IP as well. And interestingly, even Porter named patents in this article already at 79 as one of the factors which could basically contribute to the forces which control the market. So what are these? It's of course in the middle and prominent here, your competition. But it doesn't end with your competition. There are other things which influence your situation. And this is particularly the people which we are basically addicted to. It's the buyers, it's our customers. So you want to buy to the customer, and the customer will decide which products they buy. And with IP, of course, you can control to a certain extent this situation. And this is relatively traditional understanding of what IP actually is. It's trying to create an exclusive right. But it's the whole supply chain which matters. And so on the left side, and one of the forces of Porter, how he describes this, is the supply itself. And for sure, this is becoming more and more interesting today. And it's already obvious to you that IP plays a role here. If you think about front licensing, SEP, etc. This is all about supplier. It's not about your customer. It's not about your direct competition. And then, however, there are two further forces, and they are quite interesting. It's a new entrant which comes into the market, so a new player. And here there is a lot of discussion going on also how to control a new player. And one, for example, is business of scale. So, for example, if Alex and I would decide we start to build aircrafts, there is a big hurdle to come there, I think, yeah. And this is economy of scale. You cannot just enter because it has a certain scale. And the question is, does IP have a force there? I think yes, because particularly new players cannot enter a market which is full of patents. The last one, very interesting topic, is substitute products. So what if a new product circumvents the solutions which are already there? And this is probably one of the most interesting IP situations which we have, because many of our patents will just grasp to nowhere. They will not find the target because the substitute is doing something new. Maybe the e-car is a good example for that. It's still a car, but if you have patents only on the engine, only on the diesel, they will not catch a single feature of an e-driven car. So that's the substitute product. And I think this framework of the 5 forces is quite interesting to also understand an IP situation. If I think through where actually my IP wants to block whom, against what and against whom is the IP directed. And this can help you in strategy, of course, to tailor and to basically direct your portfolio, of course. But if we now deep dive a bit into it, and I have a particular situation, where shall I the hell start? And I think this little pyramid here breaks all of this down into basically 3 questions, which we can answer separately but dependent on each other in order to understand where is this interesting area where I want to place my IP in. And this is that you understand the business strategy and first understand where does the product contribute to. And in view of the buyers, in view of the customers. So where are the benefit areas? Where are the areas where my customer is willing to pay money for? And basically, these are already very good targets to put a patent on it. We could stop here, but I think it's not that easy. Of course, technical mapping is something which becomes equally important because we have to understand what are the technical enablers of these customer benefits. Please remember, we should not forget that a patent is granted on a technical invention, and this will not change so much. So we have to identify the technology and the technical features which in the end enable the customer benefit. So great. But now let's look on IP as well, because there is a landscape maybe. So don't ignore whether you are in an overcrowded field or whether you are in terra incognito. And I think this is something which makes this thing then quite holistic, because if you know where the customer is interested in, if you know how you technically enable these benefits, and if you know the patent situation they're in, then you are actually ready to have a very good view on where it makes sense and matters to put IP in. So far, so good. The next slide sums this a bit up. I think we'll send these slides to you anyhow, so you can read that forward. As I said in the beginning, I brought you one example which I think makes the story a bit interesting if you have a dynamic situation. And this one was one which I was confronted with and which we struggled a lot with in the beginning. On the level 1, you see that there is a blue and a green a bar which is developing over the years. And in this situation, it was like this. There was the traditional product, blue, and there was a forecast, so CAGR value. This is the forecast of growth averaged over 5 years. This is the term which you would like to be familiar with. And it was considered that this is growing 7.5% over the years until 25. Okay. This talk is, I think, from 2020, where we knew the 2020 days, and then we forecasted for 5 years. This is possible. For example, in Nuremberg with the GfK, you get quite good data on consumer products, and they know, and you can do such prediction. The interesting thing was that the growth was not only due to the blue bars and the traditional products, rather than to a new niche product, which was actually a substitute. And if you look at the 2010 numbers, then basically the situation was like this. There was a really small and tiny number of products, 5,000 units. Nobody has basically seen them. It was more actively even ignored. So, and if you look at the second scale, then I just mapped the market shares roughly for this green market product. Okay, so it's only the green product, and the gray company, this was the competitor coming in with a substitute product. They of course owned 100% of these 5,000. They were the only producers, and if it would have stood like that, nobody would have been interested in it. But then out of a sudden it evolved because it resonated with the customer, and the customer bought it like hell, and within only 5 years the market grew. The market grew not only by the power of the gray customer, it grew by the power of a new player who said, yes, I want to do this as well. In the beginning, they rarely or basically ignored the IP. They just entered the market and said, early entry. We go in here, this is a great product, and we grow the market. So if you look at the 2020 data, then already 15 of 50,000 units came from basically this product. And in this green product area, the yellow company already had gained 25 shares. If you have a strong brand, if you go in, you can build this. And the prediction was that over the next some years, this yellow competitor will even dominate the others. The late follower here in red may gain also market shares, but the belief is that the gray company, which actually started the battle, will play only a minor role. While, as you see, the whole market explodes with a CAGR of more than 50%. That was crazy. It was a market segment which was predicted to have a €250 million turnover per year. So what do you do in such a situation? We can look at it and lose the battle. Reactivity probably is not the best scenario here. But we can also start and say, okay, let's take what Christian said in the first slides for granted, and we understand what are actually the needs of the customer in this product. Why the hell does the customer like this product so much? Where are the benefits for him? And map it. This is an exercise which takes quite resources. Yes, maybe it's worth it. Maybe in a bigger company, it's easier to be done. But in general, if you talk to your business, if you talk to R&D, and more importantly, if you talk to your customers, they will know why, and you can test it. So we have done, for example, exercises, compared different products of customers and really found out which of the benefits are more interesting than others. And then subsequently, we attributed the tech tree to it. So tech tree means the modules which contribute were identified, which technical features contribute to which benefit area. This usually in bigger companies is already mapped. The question is what attributes to which benefit. That's the exercise. Yeah. If you have a completely new product which you don't know, it maybe makes sense to understand how the product is also physically composed. Then you build such a tech tree. And this is something where I can cite Alex Wurzer here and Theo Grünwald. This is probably the outcome of such an exercise, right? You have system components and you have the customer benefit. So you have both the customer benefit and the technical dimension. And if you cross them, you may understand in which area there might be the highest overlap. So where is the technical contribution, with which priority, which degree of innovation can I attribute to it? And on the other hand side, where is the most important or the most promising customer benefit? And with such an exercise, in the end, you may have already a nice gut feeling or a nice scientifically based view, better than gut feeling, where it makes sense to look into it deeper. Because if you remember the triangle, there is still one thing lacking at the actual IP situation. And guys, what I tell you here really depends on the size, because you cannot compare single patents like this. It must be portfolios. This is the only thing which I say, this is, be careful here, yeah, because one patent against two patents, you don't know how it goes. But if you say there are staples of 50, 100, 1,000 patents, it makes much more sense. So what if we do a landscape analysis for each of these crossing, or at least for the most important ones? And then you can see that once the gray, well, once the yellow competitor may be stronger in certain benefit tech combinations. And this is where you can deep in and say, okay, here I can turn the ship around, because maybe here the gray company already has an opportunity. Maybe here it has to really catch up and you see a strong leadership of the yellow company. And such knowledge can be used then to targetedly focus on a certain situation to improve your IP situation therein. And this is what we have done in this scenario. And this is probably also a kind of methodology which I would like to introduce to you, which, yeah, as I said, makes sense to a certain level of patent numbers. Yeah, you cannot compare single patents like that. I said that already. So what's the story here? If you look at the market, then the market shares are depicted here above. I think you can see my mouse, yeah? And you see in 2010, the competitor B in gray has 100, and then it drops because the yellow competitor and the others are catching up. So this is what you've seen before. But how's the IP situation? And if you run this, yes, this competitor B indeed has filed some patents on his products in the beginning, yeah? Just for example, I put in 5,000, it was rather less. Yeah. But in this situation, if we look only at 2010, what's the situation? It's a new product. The others have no patents which target these product features, of course. And otherwise way around, and therefore the red arrows cross here. These patents are created for the future. At the moment, they find no target because no competitor is in the market with this product. That's quite logic. Now let's look how it evolves. In 2020, the competitor C already took 25 market shares, and let's say they have filed half the patents. Yeah, it's always about ratios. It's never about concrete numbers. But let's say half the patents number B has had done, and B just relaxed. They have had their initial portfolio and no further IP created. And as you can see here down, the quotation gives you that already by this, the yellow company could catch up in the exposure. How does this work? The 5,000 patents of B now find a target. Yeah. Now you can say that the 25% of C, they can by a certain probability be caught by the 5,000 patents of B. And while C has created half of the patents, let's say 2,500, they of course find a much bigger bait in the market shares of B. But what has C to do if they now want to take the market leadership? And this is what you see here in 25. They have to file much more patents to control this. And this is probably the most probable outcome for C. And it is not the most the most likely outcome. Yeah, it's the shares of C are now as double compared to B and A. They have filed the patents equal in the equation, so that the exposure analysis equals. So in such a situation, they would have really equaled the exposure of both. But just think about that. Because they have double the market shares now, they also need double the patents of B in order to control it. And that's crazy. And that is a situation where I believe that you will find in consulting your customers that they will never ever be able to really commit to such an expenditure in patents. And this is where I think we have to go in and really explain such relations. They will lose the battle. The only thing what is not considered here, you can make it even more complicated, is time. Because of course the 5,000 patents of B already have matured now half of their lifetime. And that could be then quite interesting to consider as well. Okay, but that is, I think, a nice example where you can see how the dynamics of the market and the dynamics of the portfolio really have a cross relation. And if we look into such a niche and say, okay, here it's really important that you invest because we find these dynamics, then I think you are close to having a really good strategy with regard to a really clearly defined business target.